All right, well, welcome back to another episode of the Evangelization and Culture Show. Today, we are excited to have two guests with us here in the offices in Irving, Texas, from Ecce Films. We have Dave Kang and we have Sean Schiavolin. I said it correctly.
Schiavolin.
Yes.
Very nice.
Well, great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, really glad you guys were in town and reached out, and it's been great to just kind of chat with you guys before the show. So I figured, just to kind of get the conversation started, I did want to ask, of course, I encourage all of our viewers and listeners to go check out your work at Ecce Films, but, to start is, how did you guys get into the area of storytelling and production?
Go for it, man. I don't think I've ever heard you tell your path. Like,
let's hear it. Yeah.
Well, I studied English, Lit, and theology in college, and I've always loved all kinds of art and film, and I've always been a voice for a lot of different artists that I've known, sort of to offer an insight, reflect back to them what I think they're trying to do. But my background is actually in campus ministry with college students and University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. There are a lot of art students there. And so what I loved about my time there is long conversations over coffee. And what I loved asking is, what's your favorite movie?
Yeah,
what are you listening to? Tell me about that song. What is it about that song that moves you? And then offering sort of a lens through the faith that sort of expands what they're already seeing, So that's where my heart always was. But it wasn't until, Sean, you and I started working together and producing that I'm like, oh, I'm an artist too. I'm a filmmaker.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been involved in different kinds of artistic projects prior to that, but with film, this is the first time, when we started working on that Philly's Hearts event, on the theology of the body, it was the first time we were collaborating, so.
Yeah, well, I guess I definitely realized you were an artist then on the Philly's Hearts event, and I think we kind of started our friendship with a similar encounter like that. You just talking about art and movies and film and stuff.
Yeah.
For me, it wasn't until I had to declare my major, and I realized, I'm studying philosophy and psychology, and I'm thinking I'm going to do something like that, and I didn't like the departments I was in, and I happened to be helping my roommate do production, so acting in some of these things, and that's when I was like, wow, I can do that, that's pretty cool, because as a kid I used to love doing like making little films and stuff with my older brother. And we would do pick these American themed films, because we were overseas in England, in London, and we were kind of really longing for some identity, and we would do radio shows and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, it was really cool.
So
things were.
Spielberg. Where he used to create these little films as a kid.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I think the movie that I remember we would do, it was called BMX Bandits. It was actually an Australian-made film, but it was all about these kids just doing part of this mystery that happens but they're just basically running around on their bikes and doing tricks and stuff.
Wow.
It's amazing how sometimes when you think back to your childhood, and we don't do that, I don't think often enough, you start to dig into what were the things I was doing when I was a kid, and you start to realize that the seeds were planted very early often for many of the pursuits that we take later in life. It sounds like that's definitely the case for you. And Dave, you mentioned your past being in the pastoral world, not just the academic world, but also the world of campus ministry, or was it campus ministry?
Campus.
Yeah, and so that comes through in your work. Now as an artist, you can see that in your work there's a message that you're trying to get out there to those who are experiencing what you've created. But at the same time, the question I have for you is, how much does entertainment play into your work as as a goal for you? Is there a sort of synthesis between getting a serious message across, but also this aspect of entertainment?
Well, Sean and I, we knew each other for 10 years. We were in different parts of the country, but we were always corresponding, whether it was a papal encyclical or an album or a film. And it would be like, hey, you got to watch this movie. I need your take on it. Okay, so there's that scene when this happens. Why is that moving?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
or same thing about an encyclical. Like, what is it about this idea that's so, why does it open up the world for us? So for us, we didn't see a real difference between film or music and theology, spirituality. And we like to say we were in the lab for like 10 years with all of these references where we like figure out together what makes this tick. Okay, it's on the shelf. What is this moment, this encyclical reminds us of this song, the way that this moves by this producer. Okay, it's over here. And I think when we were called to actually produce together, we were able to draw from that and produce the work that you've seen. So for us, it was, the world that we live in is just those things breathe together. We don't see a distinction between beauty and theology. You know, it's all one experience of beauty and truth. So I think to live and breathe in that for a long time, that's your culture.
Yeah.
But if you live in a culture that divorces those things, I think that's when it becomes difficult, you know. But I think we were in the lab, you know, breathing that in for so long in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's important to make that distinction because, you know, we live in kind of a scientific materialist era where if it's not based on the scientific method, it can't be true.
Yeah.
But what you're saying, that there is truths conveyed both in the written word of theology, but also in film and music. It's different kinds of truths, and you experience it perhaps in a different way. It's not necessarily analogy A equals analogy B equals.
Right.
You know,
Right.
There's not always a premise and a conclusion. It's,
Right.
It's more of a matter of kind of truths of the heart. Sometimes that it opens up the heart, and so it seems like the medium of truth is so much wider than what the current world thinks it is.
Yeah, that reminds me of Alexander Solzhenitsyn in his Nobel speech that he gave, I believe it was at Harvard. One of the brilliant things that he said in that famous speech was that a true work of art is irrefutable. And he proposed that beauty has a way of speaking truth to our souls in a way that no syllogism, no argument, no political system or theory could ever accomplish. I wonder if you guys could speak a little bit to that.
So much to say.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
That's an awesome quote, by the way. Well, I think it is undeniable, right? Like the power of art, right? And so, you know, I think in these early conversations that Dave and I would have, you know, I think, you know, they're really sort of introspective conversations, like as two Catholics, sort of fueled and inspired by theology and by our faith, and just sort of inspired by art, right? And seeing that, you know, a lot of what and a lot of what we were talking about, I think, was messaging. Like, why isn't the sublime messaging of the church, messages of the gospel, of the church, and the richness of theology and just thought and beauty, right, on the intellectual level? Why isn't that being transmitted anymore? I mean, we went through like these eras of incredible beauty that we know historically, but we're not sort of living that anymore.
We would, over the years, I remember being like, okay, this is amazing what we're reading here. How come this isn't expressed in an adequate way?
And we would see it. We would look for, you know, we're like, oh, the secular, you know, a lot of our most of our references were secular, and we're like, wow, he's doing it, you know, that's that level of creation, and you know, sort of, I think a lot of it comes from freedom, feeling free to create, But then also, you know, we would track these artists down and be like, oh, he's like Catholic, you know. Like, he might not be practicing anymore, but it's in him. Like,
still there.
Yeah.
There's an
he was
aroma.
formed in that way.
There's an aroma, a scent, we often talk about in art, it can bring us to this place in our memories. When we talk about the true, the good, and the beautiful, I think it's easy to often talk about those things in abstraction, like a mathematical formula. But there's another transcendental, which is oneness. When those things are one, when you experience them as one, the lines between those three disappear, and oftentimes it's like you have a memory, an echo of who you really are, or like what your destiny might be. And art has a way of, this weird image, but you know the popcorn, the tin of popcorn, the butter, the caramel, and the cheese. It's like I had a friend who liked to yank out the biters, and they have the salty and the sweet moving
it's
together.
Addictive stuff. Yeah.
But I think we, as human beings, we long for those things to be one. And for us, the faith was always the widest lens that had the deepest depth of field through which you can look at the world. You know?
Yeah. I like Father Robert Spitzer, when he refers to those transcendentals, he likes to call oneness home.
Yes.
And I think that that's a profound spin on that transcendental, I think.
Yeah. And I know a lot of what y'all do is you take these transcendentals, you take, you know, maybe some current culture, you take different things on how people see the world today, how they've maybe seen the world in the past, and you kind of wrap it into a narrative, right? You wrap it into storytelling, and I know there's obviously an art to that. You know, you've got to have a talent, a vision to be able to do that. So what are some of kind of your processes that you do to build some of these stories out? And then also, what is it about storytelling that does that brings that kind of oneness together?
One that comes to mind.
We're getting deep here.
We love it.
This is awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, that's the way we were made, right? Like we're psychologically, we're gathering all the information. We're sort of trying to integrate it into a narrative, right? A story that. So naturally, that's what we do, right?
We want to do. We're trying to do it.
We're longing for that meaning, right?
Yeah, for a oneness.
Yeah, to understand our story, right? Understand who we are. But I feel like I got away from your question a little bit.
Also, just some of the how do you construct those stories? What's the process that you do that? Because, you know, part of what we're trying to do in the Institute is also to encourage artists to take their craft very seriously and to really see their production as a gift to and from the church, you know, to the culture. That what you're doing is partaking in the tradition of Michelangelo, Donatello, you know, the many greats that we've had in our tradition all around the world that have provided a cultural reference by which the world is able to see the church. And so with that comes sort of the pragmatic side too. Of what are some of those processes that you do as an artist?
We have our own process, and we prefer to we want people to experience it and not have to know our process, but because you're asking, we will share it with you.
I mean, if it's a secret,
no. It's more like cheating if you tell the audience, this was our logic, so you should feel this. You should feel it on some level, and like a scent or a memory. But with the HUMANUM series, for example, when we were asked to create a interreligious, interphilosophical meditation on the complementarity of man and woman that's global, we came up with a guiding metaphor for it, for anyone who's seen it. And the guiding metaphor for us was like, okay, if when we were cavemen, or when like eons ago, when we only had a few hours of daylight and we had to scrawl something on the wall, it had to have been the most important thing, right? Frame of meaning. So isn't the complementarity of man and woman of that importance,
Wow.
right, across cultures. So the guiding metaphor for us for the entire series was cave painting.
Wow.
So what is that? And so a modern cave painting. So when you look at the opening credits, when you look at, we looked in each culture, we looked at a work of art that for us is a cave painting, right? Whether it's Sacré Coeur, the mosaic, or a Nigerian mural, or a graffiti mural, those are all cave paintings. And for us, about the family, about man and woman. More importantly, seeing families themselves.
Yes.
The living family, they are the images of our cave painting.
You can see in some of the animation as well that you guys use in that series that you can really see the cave painting inspiration there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's so much we could say, but anything you want to add to?
Yeah, I think that's the secret, right? Is using symbols and metaphors and to demonstrate or to advance the conversation, right? I think all story, right, is essentially a conversation. It's a theme, it's a message, it's an idea, right? And then it's reconciling, especially in film, right? Like it's reconciling. Is this true? Is it not? And the more honest you are, right, and the more that you recognize and listen to the people around you and who have a right to be in that conversation, the more engaging it'll be and more interesting. And as Catholics, right, like we're obviously we have a message, right? Yeah. We have the gospel message, and so that sort of informs the way we move.
That's awesome.
Yeah. One of the things about Sean, what Sean has a gift for, when he's shooting is, so we come into these situations really prepared with our metaphors, our frames, our research, so that Providence can bring something before you as a total surprise. But in the shots you see in the HUMANUM series, there will be a subtle movement of the way a brother looks up at his sister in a certain moment, and it says so much in that moment that you don't need to explain. You're just taking it in, you know? And so that's you're able to just kind of, and it comes in like a wind, you just kind of catch it. But we need to do all that preparation so that Providence can then bring it to you, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, Sean, you talk about the importance of truth, and then, you know, just in what Dave was just saying, it's interesting because you think about the way that beauty appeals to the human heart, but also the human mind. It's this sort of intuitive, effusive transfer of truth to the human person. But and like you say, it hits you, and it's like, I don't need any more explanation. I know this is true. And sometimes it's like, I know this is true. What this is, I need to ponder on a little bit. But something has been revealed to me. In the series, the HUMANUM series, the art obviously immediately strikes anyone who watches it. What really struck me also was the caliber of thinkers that you have in that documentary. You've got Dr. Peter Kraft, you've got N.T. Wright. These are, that's the world class of the world class. Yeah. Talk a little bit about why that was important for you to have thinkers of that caliber in this series.
You can start us off.
I'll start us off. I love that you talked about what word you used about the intuition, right? So I remember Joseph Piper in Leisure, the Basis of Culture, he talks about the difference between ratio and intellectus. So there's medieval ways of understanding. Ratio is the analytical, and intellectus is sort of receiving the world with a simple intuition. You know, I'd say like wisdom is in there.
Wonder.
Wonder. We talk a lot about neuroscience and right brain, left brain, and so Ian McGilchrist, thanks for letting me, I'm going to go on the neuroscience detour. Great. Ian McGilchrist, this neuroscientist, he talks about how before the Enlightenment, metaphor was the master. Story and image was the master. After the Enlightenment, language. We gave priority to the left brain. and how the Western world is divided. We're in a sort of hall of mirrors because we've given priority to the left brain.
Yeah.
What's happened is we have allowed ratio to have more authority than it should. We're impoverished for intellectus, the simple intuitive reception of the created order. So what he's in the book, he lays out how the healthy, the right way of receiving the world is beginning in right brain through metaphor and story. The left brain verifies that through our analyzing, but we need to return authority to the right brain.
Interesting.
Right? So us as a sacramental, we're having a sacramental worldview, I think the danger sometimes is you can talk about beauty, but not be in beauty. You can take things like beauty and being embodied and turn it into an abstraction and not know you're doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the films always begin with a metaphor or frame, but then the speaker, so you begin in the right brain, then the speaker helps us open up what you've experienced. So we're not giving primary authority to the world-class speakers. They're also in wonder of the same thing with us together.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we didn't follow suit and just have them have these brilliant people, brilliant thinkers, just explain it to us, right? That's not good enough, right? We need it to be experienced, and we want it. So we purposely wanted them to support, be the support of the authority of the families that we were working with, and really sort of unpack the depth of what they're living, right, and their authority, right, as I mean, we spent some time with some amazing families, like just amazing.
But when you but like Sean said, when a wife when in Nigeria says marriage is your own project for the world, that's the golden statement, and the scholar helps us unpack that. Right? So you begin with the cave painting, you behold it together, and then the scholar helps us understand it. We don't turn the cerebral into the primary intellectus first.
One thing that one of our heroes here is John Henry Newman, now Saint John Henry Newman, and something that we bring this up all the time on the show, but the difference between real assent versus notional assent. So real assent is much more of that intellectus. It's the wisdom, it's experience, it's your own life, it's beauty, it's these things that you experience. But then there's the notional assent, which is much more syllogisms, it's analytical.
It's important.
And what he would say is that a lot of times real assent actually brings people to an assent faster than notional assent, and depending on the individual, of course. Sometimes people might be more notional. But what he would say is that the two have to coincide because notional is able to bring in precision into the real. And so the real, a lot of times, Hans Urs von Balthasar called beauty, or it had an arresting quality, even to the mind. Like you can't really explain why looking at something beautiful is so touching. You can't really explain why watching the waves hit the beach does something to you.
Right.
But then the notional is able to come in, and like you said, this idea of oneness, which is actually one of Aquinas' three aspects of beauty, is integrity, right? That they come together, and so it's able to bring a precision into what we mean by that. So it just really comes across unbelievably well in the films. And something that I particularly love, that I'd love to hear more about, is this idea of sort of a cross-cultural presentation, because I just love that you guys used, obviously, Catholic sources, but then there's also like Buddhist proverbs, and there's Indian proverbs, and I love this whole kind of seeing the world, especially when it comes to something as essential as complementarity between male and female, that is cross-cultural, but that's the Catholic thing, right? And so how are you able to, to kind of integrate all of that so well?
I don't know. Well, I mean, we want, it's just important for us. I'm gonna I'm getting lost here.
Oh, here. Well, we were talking about this earlier today and last night. Is I think with something like HUMANUM series, there is a real danger in it turning into this syncretistic smoothie where you blend it all together till it's this gray mass where you say everything's the same is the same, and that's not what we believe as Catholics, right? So with the HUMANUM series, we believe in the way we live and breathe that the Catholic lens can host truth in all aspects of wherever you find it in the world, while still remaining the fullness of revelation. So we like to say about the HUMANUM series, the DNA of it is Catholic, in that it's able to host acknowledged truth in other faiths in a particular way.
Yeah, it was really like a real gift, to be commissioned to do a project like this, because, we were forced to communicate, in this way, right? And it was in such an important way. It's the way that Dave and I see, and we place value on revealing truth, on all of these different levels, on a very human, sort of tactile, in a very human tactile way. So the setup was like, okay, you got to make we're going to have this colloquium and of 300 of the world's religious leaders, and we're going to be sharing our shared beliefs, right? And the Catholic Church is hosting this, right? And so, wow, okay, and I think the way that we've reconciled our faith, right, and everybody, right, at some point, needs to understand other religions, and our faith being, a fulfillment of that, right? So that we can see without being, we can engage without being in these other religions and other, philosophies, and we can see, we can engage with it, and we can tell the story of it and see the truth, tell them the truth from the way that we see it, right? Because, and we can acknowledge, and this is very important in conversation, right? Is to be able to acknowledge somebody, right? And the way that they're what they're saying and what they believe, and then offer them something that's in line with that, maybe, but it even takes it higher, right?
Yeah, it sounds like, what you're saying here is really just a representation of what the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches, which is just echoing the Second Vatican Council, which says that any truth that we find in any non-Christian religion is still a preparation for the gospel.
Absolutely.
And you can, that really comes through in your work. That you're not afraid to go out beyond the borders of Catholicism, beyond the borders of Christianity, to see what truth lies out there. Like, who can present it to us in a new and refreshing way, to maybe do the Chestertonian thing and make us reconsider the ordinary and see it once again as it truly is, extraordinary.
Or to see, because we're all big Tolkien fans here as well. And, he was able to see some truths in the Nordic faiths, but then you go also all the way back to St. Paul, going into the Areopagus and saying the unknown God, right? There's something there. But in order to do that well, you have to know the culture. Something we talk about here a lot is you can't evangelize a culture that you do not love.
Yeah, totally.
So it's and in order to love it, you have to know it. You have to hear it on its own terms, and you have to battle with it on its own terms, and not come in. I used battle, but not come in combative, but to wrestle with these issues in a way that is appreciative, but at the same time, it's kind of like the Socratic thing of like we're all trying to find where the treasure is.
We're beholding the true, the good together, the good and beautiful together. People, if you were to ask, like, how do you do that, right? One of the first things I would say is like, do you have dear friends who aren't Catholic, who aren't Christian? I mean, like soulmates. Yeah. Because if you don't, how can you, with your whole being, love people through a work? I don't think you can.
Yes. Yeah, we have to know them, and know them on like you said, an intimate level of truly loving them. So, and another video that I absolutely loved. I think I somewhat know the strategy behind it, but I want to hear more, particularly the economics of sex. and how it was able to really, I mean, it's expressing a Catholic truth, it's expressing a Christian truth without specifically saying this is a Christian thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just kind of a sociological perspective of like, look, this is what's happening to the culture. And in that way, it's kind of pointing to there's a place where this truth has been taught.
Yep.
You know, so what was some of the strategy ideas? I mean, I love that. I saw that was shared by New York Times, by Washington Post.
We got Freakonomics.
Freakonomics. Like, that's awesome.
One of our favorites is it was ripped off, downloaded by World Star Hip Hop.
Really?
Yeah, and then posted.
That's awesome.
And the comments section, you got to check it out. The comments section on World Star Hip Hop, someone said it's the best best conversation in the comment thread.
Really?
Told us we hit a nerve. Yeah. But for us, the metaphor of that is, and really simple, is an economics lesson. I remember some of our friends in the Catholic world are like, well, yeah, it was good, but you didn't talk about Humanae Vitae and a lot of it is knowing what to leave out. So that you lovingly just introduce a couple ideas.
Because Humanae Vitae is there.
That's totally.
You just don't say the words.
You can't, because you're not ready.
Most Catholics don't know Latin, so to say Humanae Vitae, it'll sound cool, but
yeah. And that wasn't the point of the video either, right? It was to reach beyond the kind of Catholic thing.
Exactly. I think one thing that we always try to do is, like, we don't need to keep referring to a concept, an idea with the same title, the same jargon, right? And we're trying to break it out, like with Humanum, and we can go back to economics of sex, but it's thrilling to hear them articulate. Different cultures articulate these same concepts and ideas, but in their own words, and it makes it much more rich, right? But with economics of sex, I don't know what I'm saying.
There's a lot.
It kind of reminds me of asking St. Augustine what time is, and he says, I know what time is, provided you don't ask me. Like this stuff is so second nature to you guys and you find this with experts. You try to ask them to explain their trade, and it's almost like it's been so fully integrated into what they do that it's really hard for them to do it.
Yeah. But I think too that the strategy behind at least what I'm understanding of the video is that you have to start with baby steps sometimes when it comes to the culture. That if we come in with the full gamut of what the church teaches, it can be like a fire hose because it's a lot. I mean, it's a very deep well that we have. And so, I mean, Humanum Vitae and many of these other encyclicals are kind of just concretizing what the church has always taught and what a lot of cultures have always understood. But today, because we've been kind of so far removed from, as you said, that intellectus, that wonder and trying to think in generational terms, we only think in the here and now. And so the way that video is set up is showing, look what's happening to society based purely off of a sociological and scientific research. It's not really a matter of faith, but it does point to the fact that there's some truth there.
I had somebody who, Sean, approached me about that video, female, and she said she's the Catholic in her circles, with her friends. She's like the kind of Catholic who has dear friends who aren't Catholic, which is great. She said she shared it with friends of hers. Like a week and a half later, she got an email back from her non-Christian friend saying, "You shared that video with me. I got to tell you, it really ticked me off."
Really?
Yes, but as I thought about it, I realized it's dead on.
Wow.
So, Humanae Vitae. I remember Janet Smith's cassette contraception.
Right. Back in the 90s. Yeah.
So, okay, you have the true, the good, and the beautiful. You have the truth, but EOS, I think it's a desire to bring the beauty, the beautiful, and the good. Sometimes I think we as Catholics we react by hyperextending the true, thinking that's what'll reach them. But really, you need all three legs.
Yes.
So EOS, you have to pull back on the hyperextended truth, balance it out with the beautiful and the good, in order to give a sense of home.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it's like this again, going back to Newman. I mean, St. John Henry, he's he was so right, and I think we're really discovering that now in light of the recent canonization. Going back to the real and notional ascent, the distinguishing feature is when real ascent occurs, and this happens through the true, the beauty, and the good all together, what happens is it stirs you to action.
Yeah.
The notional kind of keeps you up in the clouds. It's got its place.
Yeah.
We need to go there, like you already said. And yet, when we experience real ascent, it's not just like, oh, I'm angry because this is true and this means my life has to change.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just like an idea, my life has to change. It's going to stir a change in that person's life.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are some of, just kind of switch gears a little bit, who are some of your inspirations? Like, so, I mean, secular, both Catholic and secular, as far as like production, artists, music, etc. Who are people that really kind of inspire you to kind of raise your game?
Yeah. Go for it, man.
Me? Well, I mean, Malik.
Yep.
Inevitably.
Terrence Malick.
Yeah,
we talk about him a lot.
Yeah.
He lives here in Texas. So.
That's right.
Yeah. I remember seeing Malik, seeing Tree of Life, tracking, we always talk about it. But seeing Tree of Life and being like PO'd myself, I was like, man, I don't even know where, like he just did what everything I ever dreamed of doing conceptually, like, because he's just throwing in everything, right?
Yes.
And it's grounded in the personal relationship between, within his family, right?
Yeah.
Relationship of the loss of his brother, right? And then like throwing in the cosmos, right?
Yes.
And the end of time, and
there's that one scene that lasts like 20 minutes, just going through the cosmos.
And
it hits you. You kind of realize after that 20 minutes, you're like, wow, I didn't realize how long that was. It was just kind of so beautiful. It was taking me through kind of what wonder looks like.
And you can't do that unless you're sort of really grounded, or like your faith is like really great. Like throwing it in and trusting that it's all going to work, right? And having it's very courageous, right? Like to go there and do that, and obviously it took him like 10 years or something.
Taking that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the intellectus that he lives in. It's not some arty experiment that he wants to indulge in. He's inviting you into his activity, contemplative activity. I remember seeing The Thin Red Line in high school. We were so blessed. We had this retired Paulist priest, Father James O'Gara, as our pastor at Korean Martyrs Catholic Parish. And he goes, "What are you all doing Sunday after Mass?" It's like, "Oh, we're going to go watch this video." "No, you're not. We're going to watch a movie. It's by this rogue filmmaker. He hasn't put a movie out in years. We're going to go. It's called The Thin Red Lines by Terrence Malick." Wow. Who's Terrence Malick? Just go. And there's moments in that one. I remember that was one of the movies you and I talked about. When I was referencing the type of, the way Sean's able to shoot in the world and get certain B-roll, we call it B-roll, but images, to me, the words memory and grace come to mind. And there are moments in The Thin Red Line that Tree of Life is like built around, where like you have the memories and then the kind of grace like comes through it.
Yeah, he has a way of illustrating that, like a technique that he developed that I think is like, he really sort of, it became his stamp. That he and you see it like really developing in The Thin Red Line, but these memory sequences, like the camera's just drifting as if, and it's very loose and it's very personal. It's like he tapped into something that, in a way that we remember things.
Yeah.
Right?
I can't remember if he is he religious? I can't remember, but is he? Okay.
Yeah, he's Christian.
He's a Christian. Okay.
Keeps that quiet out of respect. I think
okay.
for to give the audience their respect, their experience with it, which that's so loving.
Yes, exactly. It's able to meet them where they're at. Yeah, and he's able to integrate a lot of biblical and theological narratives that are kind of just an undertone throughout. I mean, in Knight of Cups, it's clearly like the Augustine conversion from and so I love that he's one of your heroes. But who else kind of stands out?
Yeah, we should do something more obscure.
Daniel Lanois.
I was thinking.
Do you know who he is?
No.
you know who he is because you know all the albums he's produced.
Okay.
U2's albums, Peter Gabriel.
Really? Wow.
Time Out of Mind, Bob Dylan. Wrecking Ball by Emmylou Harris.
Really?
All these
Daniel
Grammy
Lanois.
Award
He
winning,
produced them, and when we went through a time where we realized all of our favorite albums were like, what's his name? And Sean's like, you know, he released solo material. There's this album called Shine. There is a scent to his work. When you speak of the oneness, there's an aroma, a sense of, like, it feels like we're in that room, like we're entering into that temple of what happened there when they recorded that. But it's you know, that crude, like the popcorn thing of like it becoming everything bleeding together. There's something in his work that has always been something we aspire to. But he was influenced by, like so many great musicians, by the experience of church.
Really? Yeah.
Gospel churches. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That there is something there, a sense of home there.
Yes.
So to turn that into like put that into a Peter Gabriel record.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's
Kind of a
in
transcendent
there.
quality.
Yes.
Of some kind.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, the artists that we like, and like Lanois, like I identify, like he's got so much integrity, right, and focus on integrity on all these, like, and bringing all this truth and quality craftsmanship, like integrating all of that, this truth and honesty on every level, right, and so it's like this. And then like his solo stuff, like when I heard his solo stuff, obviously, U2 and all these albums are like really like just sonically like beautiful and have this real depth and they have real honesty that you can feel and resonate with. But yeah, his solo stuff, he grapples with, like, you can tell these are theology. He grapples with his faith, the faith of his, so it's filled with symbols that are, like Catholic Christian symbols and stuff. And so, we don't know, like, we don't really know him personally, but we kind of, we doubt that he's probably like, a practicing Catholic, but it's in it. Like he's so honest in his art that it reflects and it bears fruit in that. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we've only got a few more minutes here, and one thing I do want to ask you guys before we're done here is, what advice would you have for maybe up and coming or somebody who's desiring to get more into their artistic qualities and really produce something beautiful, but to do it well? What advice would you have?
I think it's a matter of, like, as a Catholic artist, you've got to form yourself. Like you've really got to work on purifying yourself, being pursuing self sanctity, but then letting that the faith that you develop, that relationship that you develop, encourage you and embolden you to go out, right? Like you said. Being called in the Ascent, right? And so it's a balance, and you can't be insular, right? Yeah. You got to get out. And I think once you start going out, your understanding broadens, and it becomes, your experience becomes more rich, and so there's a real tendency to stay in. And then the other thing is as we can't expect not to suffer, right? I just worked on this piece recently, and blown away by Reverend Martin Luther King. It is a civil rights piece, and what he was able to do, or what the movement was able to do, and it was very clear. It was all motivated by the gospel and religion, and that they were preaching, unmerited suffering is redemptive, right? And so they understood that if they're going to get something accomplished, they need to be well formed,
Yeah.
right? And they need to be like up to the highest degree, like to not react with violence, right? But we're experiencing that on a much different level, hidden ways these days. But we've got to be ready to endure sacrifices to produce fruit.
Yeah,
I would add intellectus as an activity, contemplate the world. When things touch you in the world, bring it into prayer and bring it before God and ask, like, why does this touch me? And then your craft, John, you're great at talking about craft all the time, which was then try to do intellectus in a form. If it's film, then you're trying to do that in this form. So a lot of trial and error of your theories of like, there's gonna be a time when it's not gonna be worthy of what's the activity in your head, but you have to trial and error, you have to perfect it, you know, and it's not gonna come right away. But if you don't have that intellectus activity to start with, you don't have anything to express.
Go from.
Could I share
Go ahead. No, absolutely. See God and everything,
an example. I remember, all my life I loved like brown paper, brown craft paper.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why.
Yeah.
But then I read a piece of chalk by Chesterton in college, 2-page essay, where he talks about one day he had this desire to go color. Have you read this?
Oh yes.
So and he goes, he was asking this lady about, I need some brown paper, and he goes, I tried to explain that not only I like brown paper, but I like the quality of brownness in paper, just like I like the quality of brownness in October woods or in beer. Brown paper represents the primal twilight of the first toil of creation. When you put chalk on it, a bright colored chalk or two, you can pick out points of fire in it, sparks of gold, and blood red and sea green, like the first fierce stars that sprang out of divine darkness. He's talking about the quality of chalk on brown paper. So Sean and I, when we did the HUMANUM series, cave painting, right?
Yeah.
We're like, how do we use this in HUMANUM? And so we picked out these moments in the film. So these B-roll moments, that Malick-esque moments, we're like, okay, let's, we talk about sublimation. In physics, it's when a solid goes into a gas immediately. So like this moment where like it just into beauty. So we had artists use pastels on brown paper to animate these brief moments. And we were very strategic. What moments are like cave painting moments? The important moments. So for us, when the audience sees that, they shouldn't think, hey, Chesterton, right? They should just feel stirred somehow. But for us, like, that's the kind of thing I would talk to you about. Like, what is it about brown paper? Or like, what is it about Lanois' guitar? You take that to prayer for a long time, and then you try to find it in your craft a way to express it.
Yeah. Bishop Barron says that it's trying to figure out, like, what's that song or that movie that rocked your world and changed you? And it's something that internalizes. It kind of changes the way you see the world. It expands your heart, all of that kind of stuff. So that's great advice, man. And for all of our viewers and listeners, where's the best place that they can go and find more about Ecce Films?
Our website, etchefilms.com.
Awesome. Yeah, and you can actually go there and view these series that we've been talking about.
You can find it there,
That's ECCE Films, correct?
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. All right. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. I'm sure this will continue. We'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You're doing great work.
Joy to sit with you all, and we're so grateful for all the work of Word on Fire. So grateful. It's a joy to be here with you.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, that was another great episode of the Evangelization and Culture Show. For all of our viewers, if you're interested in the Word on Fire Institute, be sure to go to wordonfire.institute, where we've got courses on many of the names that we've thrown out today, such as Newman, von Balthasar, etc. So maybe it can bring some of that ratio side and kind of bring some precision to what we were talking about in regard to the intellectus today. So again, that's wordonfire.institute. When you sign up, you not only get access to the courses, but numerous other aspects to help form you as an evangelist, including a quarterly journal that comes to you in the mail that reaches out to individuals like Ecce Films to teach us a little bit more about the way of beauty and how to evangelize the modern culture. So again, that's wordonfire.institute, and we will see you again next time.